She was ranked outside the world's top 140 just 2 years ago. Nobody outside her home country knew her name. Coaches whispered that she had talent, but talent alone doesn't win matches on the biggest stages in tennis. Then something happened on the grass courts of Wimbledon that nobody saw coming. A 21-year-old walked onto court after court, and one by one, she started beating players who were supposed to beat her. She didn't just win. She beat a defending Grand Slam champion. She made history that no player from her country had ever made before. And when the dust settled, one of the biggest banks in her homeland didn't just send a congratulations message. They stopped everything to build a public tribute around her name. This is the story of how a girl who once dreamed under the lights of a small tennis academy became the highest-ranked player her country has ever produced. And the wildest part is, this might only be the beginning. Manila doesn't stop for many things. It's a city of traffic jams, street food stalls, and 18 million people moving at their own pace, day after day. But on a July evening in 2026, something made the city pause. Word spread that a plane was landing, not carrying a politician, not carrying a pop star. It was carrying a 21-year-old tennis player named Eala, and she was coming home a different person than the one who had left just weeks earlier. To understand why her homecoming mattered so much, you have to go back further than this one flight. Eala grew up in a country that has never really been known for tennis. Basketball owns the hearts of most Filipino sports fans. Boxing has its legends. But tennis, at the highest level, the Grand Slam level, the level where names become immortal, had never truly belonged to the Philippines. Not once in the sport's modern history had a Filipino broken into the world's top 30. Not once had a Filipino reached the fourth round of a major tournament. These weren't just numbers. They were ceilings that nobody from her country had ever touched. Alex started early. She picked up a racket at age 4, long before she understood what any of this would eventually mean. She trained hard enough and showed enough promise that she eventually made her way to Spain, to the prestigious Rafa Nadal Academy, a place built to turn raw talent into complete players. It was there that her game began to take shape, the shots getting sharper, the movement getting smarter, the mental toughness getting tested against players from every corner of the world. But talent from an academy doesn't guarantee anything on the professional tour. The WTA Tour is unforgiving. Hundreds of women fight every single week just to stay ranked inside the top 100, let alone climb higher. For years, Eala's name would show up in the rankings, then disappear from headlines, then show up again. She had flashes. A junior Grand Slam title at the US Open. A run to the semifinals in Miami in 2025 that stunned people who follow the sport closely. But flashes are not the same as a breakthrough. Flashes fade. The tennis world has seen countless prodigies burn bright for one tournament and vanish the next season. What made 2026 different was consistency. Eala didn't just have one good week. She built one good month on top of another. She won a WTA 125 title in Birmingham. She reached the round of 16 at a prestigious grass court event. She defeated multiple top 10 opponents on grass, a surface that rewards precision and confidence, two things she was clearly gaining by the week. Slowly, without most casual sports fans noticing, she was climbing back toward the career-high ranking she had touched earlier in the year. And then Wimbledon happened. Wimbledon isn't just another tournament. It's the oldest, most prestigious stage in tennis, a place wrapped in tradition, where the grass is manicured to perfection and the pressure is unlike anywhere else in the sport. Most players who reach the main draw are simply happy to survive the first round. Eala didn't just survive. She started winning. And she kept winning against opponents who were not supposed to lose to her. By the time she reached the fourth round, something historic had already happened, something no Filipino tennis player, man or woman, had ever accomplished at a Grand Slam tournament. But the story was far from over. Because waiting in that fourth round was a name that would turn her run from impressive to unforgettable. A defending Wimbledon champion. A player ranked near the very top of the sport. Nobody outside of Eala's inner circle believed she had a real chance. The name was Iga Świątek. To most sports fans, even people who don't follow tennis closely, that name means something. Świątek had been the defending champion, one of the most dominant players of her generation, someone who had spent years near the very top of the sport. When the draw came out, and Eala saw who stood in her path in the third round, Most people expected a short match, a respectful loss, a nice story about a Filipina who fought hard but ran into a buzzsaw. That is not what happened. Eala walked onto the court that day carrying something that's hard to teach. Confidence built from months of quiet, steady improvement. She wasn't playing like someone who was happy just to be there. She was playing like someone who believed she belonged. Point by point, she matched Świątek's power. She absorbed the pressure of the moment, the crowd, the history, the weight of everything that comes with facing a champion on one of the most famous courts in the world. And when the final point landed in her favor, the scoreboard told a story that Philippine tennis had never told before. A Filipina had beaten a defending Wimbledon champion. The tennis world took notice almost immediately. This wasn't a fluke result buried in a first-round match nobody watches. This happened on one of the biggest stages, deep enough into the tournament that cameras were rolling, commentators were reacting live, and fans back home were watching in the middle of the night, glued to whatever stream they could find. In the Philippines, a country separated from London by thousands of miles and a massive time difference, people were staying up, refreshing their phones, waiting for updates on a match most of them never expected to matter this much. But here is what made this moment even more remarkable. Eala wasn't finished. Beating a champion is one thing. Backing it up is another. Many players who pull off a shocking upset run out of gas in the very next match, drained emotionally and physically from the biggest win of their career. The pressure resets. The next opponent smells blood, knowing the upset winner is playing on adrenaline that eventually runs out. Her next opponent in the fourth round was Jasmine Paolini, a player experienced enough and skilled enough to know exactly how to punish any letdown. This was the moment where Eala's story could have quietly ended with a respectable but forgettable defeat, the kind of result that gets a small mention before the tournament moves on to its later rounds without her. Instead, she made Paolini work for every single point. The match went to 3 sets. Eala didn't fold. She didn't look like a player who was satisfied with what she had already accomplished. She looked like a player who wanted more. In the end, Paolini's experience proved to be just enough, and Eala's incredible Wimbledon run came to a close in the fourth round. On paper, it was a loss. In reality, it was the moment everything changed. Because reaching the fourth round of Wimbledon wasn't just a good result. It was history. No Filipino, man or woman, had ever gone this far at a Grand Slam tournament before. Not in the entire modern era of the sport. Eala had just done something that an entire nation of tennis fans had been waiting generations to see. And back home, people weren't just watching the scoreboard anymore. They were watching what this result would mean for her ranking, for her career, and for a country that was about to discover it finally had a legitimate global tennis star. Tennis rankings don't update in real time. Players don't see the number change the moment their final match ends. There's a waiting period, a quiet stretch of days where a career-defining tournament run sits frozen, unofficial, while officials tally points from every event across the tour. For Eala, this meant that even after her Wimbledon run ended, she had to wait. She had to sit with the knowledge that something big had happened, without yet knowing exactly how big. On Monday, July 13th, the wait ended. The official WTA rankings dropped, and there it was in black and white. World number 28. Not just a strong number. A career high. A number that eclipsed her previous best of number 29, which she had touched back in March after a strong showing at Indian Wells. She had climbed 4 full spots in a single update, gaining 230 points from her Wimbledon performance alone, pushing her total to 1,666 points. To put that number in context, you have to understand where Eala had been standing barely 2 years earlier. She had entered 2026 ranked outside the top 130. 12 months before that, she was hovering around number 140, a wildcard entry fighting just to get into the main draw of bigger tournaments instead of being guaranteed a spot. Players ranked that low don't get easy paths. They get qualifying rounds, tough draws, and very little margin for error. The jump from number 140 to number 28 in roughly 2 years isn't just improvement. It's a complete transformation of where a player sits in the sport's hierarchy. And there was something else buried in that ranking update, something that turned this from a personal milestone into a national one. No Filipino, man or woman, had ever cracked the top 30 of the WTA singles rankings before. Eala wasn't just having a good year. She had become the highest-ranked Filipino tennis player in the history of the sport. Word of the new ranking spread through the Philippines almost instantly. This is a country where basketball dominates the sports conversation, where boxing legends are treated like royalty, and where tennis has historically lived on the margins of the national sports scene. But this was different. This wasn't a story confined to sports pages. It became a story about national pride, about proof that a Filipino athlete could compete with and beat the best players in the world on tennis's biggest stages. The timing made it even sweeter. Just one day after the rankings update, on Sunday, July 12th, Eala touched down in Manila. She hadn't been home in weeks, and now she was returning not just as a promising young talent, but as a certified piece of history. A hero's welcome was waiting for her, the kind reserved for athletes who do something an entire country has been hoping to see for generations. But this is where the story takes an interesting turn, because it wasn't just tennis fans and casual sports followers who reacted to her rise. Major institutions back home had been watching her career closely for years, waiting for a moment like this. And now that the moment had finally arrived, one of the largest financial institutions in the Philippines was about to make sure the entire country knew exactly how much this achievement mattered. The Bank of the Philippine Islands didn't just send a quiet congratulations note. They moved fast, and they moved public. Within a short window after the ranking update, BPI posted a tribute on Facebook that started spreading across the country almost as quickly as the ranking news itself. The message was simple but emotional. It spoke directly to every young Filipina who has ever laced up a pair of shoes with a dream bigger than her circumstances. It talked about ruffled socks and light-up shoes and chubby cheeks, painting a picture of every little girl who might now believe her own dreams weren't too big after all. This wasn't the first time BPI had celebrated Eala. Their connection to her went back years, long before the world knew her name the way it does now. BPI had been supporting her since 2022, back when she was still building her reputation, still fighting her way up from rankings most casual fans never see. But this relationship ran deeper than a typical sponsorship deal. Eala had grown up in the Eala community, a place where many BPI employees were friends and colleagues of her own parents. Her connection to the bank wasn't manufactured by a marketing team chasing a rising star. It existed long before anyone knew she would become one. That history mattered now more than ever. When BPI's leadership spoke about her achievement, it didn't sound like corporate messaging. BPI President and CEO TG Limcayaco was quick to publicly recognize what she had done. Kathy Santa Maria, the bank's head of customer and marketing, later put it plainly, saying Eala had been part of the BPI family for many years and that watching her grow into one of the country's most accomplished athletes had been inspiring for everyone involved. But BPI didn't stop at social media posts and official statements. As Eala returned home, the bank helped organize public events around her homecoming, giving fans across the country a chance to see, in person, the young woman who had just rewritten Philippine tennis history. One of those events, a fan meet planned at the Glorieta Activity Center in Makati, promised to bring her directly to the people who had been cheering her on from thousands of miles away during every single point of her Wimbledon run. During a media event tied to her homecoming, reporters didn't just ask Eala about her tennis. They asked about her future, about her growing prize money, about how a 21-year-old handles this kind of sudden financial and professional responsibility. Her answer revealed just how deep her support system actually ran. She spoke about being lucky enough to have the guidance of her parents and the guidance of what she called her family at BPI, a phrase that made it clear this partnership was never just about a logo on a jersey. What made this entire moment so powerful wasn't just the ranking, and it wasn't just the bank's tribute. It was the way an entire country seemed to be recognizing, all at once, that they finally had a global tennis star of their own. A player who wasn't just competing. A player who was winning on the biggest stages against the best names in the sport. And as the celebrations continued back home, Eala's attention had already started shifting toward what came next. Because a career-high ranking doesn't mean the climb is over. If anything, for a 21-year-old just entering the most demanding stretch of the tennis calendar, it might only be the beginning.